what's happening really in that scenario is you are giving yourself jet lag, right? You're basically, if your wake time is like, over a couple hours than your weekday wake up time, you are really giving yourself something called social jet lag. And it is the equivalent of traveling from coast to coast. So, people think like I'm doing something really great for my body and like I'm really treating myself to this extra sleep, but it actually can backfire on you big time.
Do you want to wake up feeling like you are stepping into who you are meant to be, into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hope Pedraza, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to the show. Today I have on the show Morgan Adams. Now Morgan is a holistic sleep coach for women who struggle with getting a good night's sleep consistently. Her goal is to help women feel better and live better. And the key really begins with a good night's sleep. And that is what we are talking about today. She has a whole bunch of accreditations and certifications in sleep science, and she has so many good tangible tips here. So for those of you who have ever struggled with sleep, you are still struggling with sleep, or maybe just you struggle with sleep every now and then, this is such a good episode for you. Or if you have family members who do, she has so many tangible tips in this episode talking about the real reasons why we struggle with sleep, how we can really build consistent sleep practices in the morning and in the evening, what the effects of inadequate sleep are, and how we can know if we're getting the quality and quantity sleep that we really need. And then just overall ways to improve sleep to really get the best sleep of your life. She has transformed people's lives and her own, actually, by putting these things into practice. So this is such a good, tangible episode. I'm really excited to bring this to y'all. So let's jump in. All right, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Morgan, and Morgan is a sleep coach. And she is, I want to say, like, I don't know if this is a thing, Morgan, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I want to say like sleep scientist, because she has like advanced certifications in sleep science. So I feel like sleep scientist is a good term for this. And I'm really excited because I feel like this is a conversation that, at least in my world in functional nutrition, this comes up literally with every client. There's something going on with sleep. So I feel like this is such a deep conversation. We can take so many different ways. So I'm really excited to bring her on and for you just to share all your knowledge. So thanks for joining me today, Morgan.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited about our conversation, Hope.
Yes, me too. So can you, I guess let's kind of start from you explaining kind of what you do as, a sleep therapist and as a holistic sleep coach. And like I said, sleep scientist, I don't know if that's a thing, but I feel like that's a thing. So can you kind of explain what that is and what you do?
Yeah. So sleep coaching is sort of a relatively new profession. We have a lot of folks who are nutritionists and trainers. There's gazillions of those out there. But when you actually try to find out how many sleep coaches there are, you really can't find an answer because it's really an emerging field. Mm-hmm. And so there is some sleep science. There's a component of sleep science woven into sleep coaching, but we're really not that nerdy. We know enough to be dangerous about sleep science, but really sleep coaching is taking elements of behavioral change, accountability, helping people reframe their behaviors and their attitudes and beliefs around sleep under a coaching umbrella. So I'm definitely not, substituting as a therapist or a sleep doctor. And one of the things that I like to talk about in my own training as a sleep coach is that I have been trained to look at people and ask very specific questions that can identify whether or not they might have a more serious sleep disorder. Now, I'm not diagnosing, just to be clear, my scope is not diagnosing. But if I suspect, based on my line of questioning, that they do have some kind of sleep disorder or problem out of my scope, I have a really great network of professionals who I can turn to refer that client. So all their bases are covered. So hopefully that gives a little more clarity onto what sleep coaching is. Again, a relatively new field, but I think that in the next few years, we're going to see a lot more sleep coaches out there as sleep has become more of a topic of discussion, especially since I've noticed since the pandemic started, it became more in the forefront, more searches online, more research. So it's a good time to be in the sleep field because it's just going to keep growing.
Yeah, totally. No, and I think you're so right. And I was just reading an article the other day that was talking about that. I think people are recognizing which, I mean, not like it hasn't always had an impact, but I think people are just now recognize the impact that sleep has on their health and well-being, just like overall. Like, obviously we know it affects, our energy and stuff, but I think people are finally connecting dots to like all these other things that are going wrong in their bodies, and that the sleep part is huge. And I think there's so many more studies that have come out lately about, how it relates to like our brain health and, that kind of thing. So no, I totally see it as this new emerging field for sure. So I think I love the work. I love the work that you're doing. And I like that you said that you're helping with behavior changes. We talk about a lot this in like, the health coaching space, you're a sleep coach, like with health and nutrition coaching, it's the same thing. Like it's all about behavior changes. So what do you think, just as far as like your scope of work that, the clients you've worked with thus far, what do you think are some of the biggest behaviors that, and this isn't to like be super judgy about people, but what are some of the biggest behaviors that you see need to shift to like build better sleep habits and stuff?
Yeah. Well, I think we could start with maybe being really inconsistent in people's wake up times. That seems to be a biggie because I don't know about you, but when I was a teenager, a younger adult, I'm a little older than you, but a younger adult teenager, we used to, get up early for school and then we would just sleep in on the weekend.
Right.
We would sleep till whenever. And sometimes as adults, we fall into the same patterns. And what really ends up happening, and this happened to me actually well into my 40s, mid 40s. So, I mean, it wasn't just as a kid, but what would happen is I would get up, for work at 6. And then on the weekend, I'd stay up till like 1:00 to watch Saturday Night Live or something like that. Yeah. And then Monday, I was just dragging butt. I mean, it was just like a chore. I couldn't get to sleep Sunday night. Monday morning was a bitch. And then, by the time Wednesday rolled around, I was recovered. So only to start that process again. Right. So what's happening really in that scenario is you are giving yourself jet lag, right? Yeah. You're basically, if your wake time is like, over a couple hours, then your weekday wake up time, you are really giving yourself something called social jet lag. And it is the equivalent of traveling from coast to coast.
Crazy. Yeah.
So, I mean, people think like I'm doing something really great for my body and like I'm really treating myself to this extra sleep, but it actually can backfire on you big time. And I'm not saying that on the weekend you need to like necessarily set an alarm to wake up at the exact same time that you do on the weekday. But, within an hour or so is really going to be so helpful for you to maintain your energy level and your sleep drive for the rest of the week. So that's a biggie. Another one is I think we are spending way too much time indoors. I believe, we're spending like 93% of our time indoors, according to a study from like the early 2000s. And given that we have more digital products now, we have had a pandemic, people I think are spending even more time indoors than they were, close to 20 years ago. And when you are depriving yourself of that natural sunlight, you are really missing an opportunity to regulate some key hormones and to boost your mood. So I really recommend to my clients to be getting outside in the morning, first thing in the morning, getting that sunlight, getting a midday break, and then trying to, make make contact with the sunset so that you're exposing your eyes to these various iterations of light throughout the day.
Yep.
Those are a couple key ones. I would say another biggie is having your phone next to your bed at night. And then what ends up happening is, you're like, oh, I'm just going to lie here for a few minutes, and you pick up your phone and like, it's like 10 o'clock and you're getting ready to go to bed. And lo and behold, you're like scrolling on Instagram
2 hours later.
For 2 hours. And so the problem with that is that you can get overly stimulated by the content. I think that's primarily what's happening. The other component of that is that your eyes are getting exposed to that blue light, which is suppressing your melatonin. And also, if you have your phone next to your bed, you might be tempted to reach for it if you wake up at night. Like if you wake up 3 a.m. and you're like, oh, I can't get back to sleep.
Yeah.
You grab that phone and man, you're not going to fall asleep if you're using that phone.
Yeah.
So those are a few of like the really, most noted ones that I see on a regular basis that people may not be connecting the dots on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, those are great. Those are great. Well, and I love that too. I have not heard of the social jet lag before, like the term, but it makes sense because you always hear this saying, like, basically it's impossible. You can't ever like make up for sleep. Like you can't ever make up on missed sleep, whatever. So that makes sense. Like you're basically putting yourself in jet lag. So it makes complete sense. So as far as like habit forming or habit breaking, I guess, and then creating new habits, what would be your best suggestions on building an ideal morning routine and evening routine for better sleep?
Yeah. I am a big proponent of the morning routine. In fact, I think it's actually more important than an evening routine because when you wake up in the morning, you have the opportunity to set your mind and your body on a good trajectory for the rest of the day. And you're able to sort of bolster yourself against future stressors throughout the day if you've got your mindset right. And that way, impending stressors throughout the day may not impact you as much as if you just like sprung out of bed and like drove off to work. So I'm a really huge proponent of that morning routine. And so a few key elements to that, and we kind of touched on this earlier, but really within the first hour of waking up, you want to make sure that you go outside and experience that natural sunlight. You only need about 15 minutes of this. Key point though is to not wear your sunglasses when you're outside because your eyes need to come into contact with the natural light. Your retina needs to, the light needs to hit your retina. And then from that point, there's a triggering your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is basically your circadian pacemaker. And when that happens, you have a very lovely cascade of hormones that are, going throughout the day to regulate your sleep, your sleep and wake cycle. So, it's just so funny because I do take my dog out every morning in our neighborhood for a walk and I see other dog moms and, we wave and they're wearing sunglasses and I'm like, please, I'm like, what? I just want to yell, please take your sunglasses off. You're really like impacting your ability to, get those hormones going. So that's a really good thing to think about first thing in the morning. We already touched on this earlier is just the waking up at the same time, every morning as close to, the same time as you can. And then I like to talk to my clients about something called the 3 M's in the morning. So the 3 M's stand for movement, mindfulness, and mindset. So movement could be typically I would recommend my client carve out an hour for this 3M morning routine, but I realize that not everyone has an hour to spend in the morning. If you have young kids, they have to get off to school or what have you. But if you could at least, carve out some amount of time and then divide that morning routine into sort of like 3 different semi-equal segments of time. So let's just say you had an hour. Best case scenario would be like 20 minutes of movement. That could be a walk outside. You're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So you're getting that sunlight. So the movement could be that stretching, yoga, a jog, whatever way you like to move your body. The mindfulness component for maybe 20 minutes, that would look like meditation or breath work or even just sitting in silence. And I mean, there's loads and loads of apps that are free for meditation and breath work. So if you don't know where to start there, you can always find something in an app. And then finally, mindset. And I look at this as either positive affirmations or journaling or reading a positive book, like a personal development or, book like that. So that's kind of how I like to look at mornings. It's just keeping things very positive, trying to get your mindset straight so that whatever stresses you happen upon during the day don't derail your sleep.
Yeah. I love all of those. I love all of those 3 M's because I mean, that's basically, a huge chunk of what I help my clients with the functional nutrition piece. It's the mindset, the mindfulness, the movement, all of that. So I love that. That's a great way. Well, and I think the morning I've been seeing, it's funny we're talking about this because I've been seeing more and more posts from kind of like the bro marketing guys where it's like, you don't need a morning routine to be successful, blah, blah, blah. But I really think, I feel like for a while, the morning routine was a big thing. And then I feel like it's kind of flipped and people are like, a lot of people, not everybody, but I feel like it's really an underestimated part of our health, because I do think it's important. And like you're saying, I mean, it literally helps with your circadian rhythm and your sleep cycle. So, I mean, it's like a crucial part of the wellness equation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I follow a pretty strict morning routine consisting of, basically the same things for an hour every morning. Mm-hmm. And there have been a few occasions where, I had maybe an early morning doctor's appointment or something like outside of my control mm-hmm. happened. And I didn't get to do the routine. And I just felt off all day long.
Right.
I didn't feel on my game. I didn't feel as sharp. I didn't feel as grounded.
Totally.
So, like I said, if you don't have an hour, carve out some schedule for yourself, even if it's a half an hour, 20 minutes, just, keeping it consistent and and keeping it a priority as best you can.
Yep. I love that. Oh, it's such good advice. So for those who are wondering, they're listening and they're wondering like, okay, these are all great, but how do I know if I'm getting the quality and the quantity sleep? Like what are some signs that would be evident in your body or your mind or whatever that would show that you maybe aren't getting the quality and quantity sleep that you should? Yeah.
Well, sleep deprivation actually has been described by the CDC as a public health epidemic.
I believe it.
So it is a really, really big issue. And basically, there's a list of things that I'll just kind of run through that, you may be able to identify as something that you may have experienced or experiencing. These are potential signs that you might not be getting enough sleep during the night. So it could be feeling really irritable and on edge during the day. That's a big one. Having trouble focusing, having a hard time remembering things, getting sick more often with, colds and viruses, like, that's a big thing. Mm-hmm. Being forgetful, having a slower reaction time. If you're like playing sports or, doing workouts, you might notice that you're like dropping the ball a lot more often. Low mood is also something to look at. And then another one that a lot of people don't make the connection with is weight gain. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cause when you're not sleeping enough, you could be more prone to gaining weight. Those are the biggest telltale signs. And the unfortunate part is that because there hasn't been quite enough awareness about sleep deprivation, is that some people may not realize that some of these things that I just described are traced back to sleep.
Yeah.
Like people might be wondering, why is this happening?
Yep.
And it's not always because of sleep, but it's quite often because people don't have enough sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, and like I said, this is one of the big things with my clients. One of the big things we talk about is sleep. We talk about rest and proper sleep. And I think I wanted to go back to the point you were making about the connection between weight gain and sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a big one. Because like you said, I think a lot of people don't trace a lot of things back to inadequate sleep and improper sleep. So can you kind of go a little bit deeper there with that one? Because I think there's going to be a lot of people listening that are going to connect some dots here when they hear you talk about this.
Sure. So when we're sleep deprived, what we usually see are changes in two key hormones that help us regulate our weight. The first one is called ghrelin, and this is the hormone that makes us want to eat. Mm-hmm. So when you're sleep deprived, your ghrelin level increases. And so you'll find yourself being hungrier than normal. The other hormone is leptin. And this is the hormone that tells you, hey, it's full. I'm full. Put the fork down. And so when you're sleep deprived, your leptin level decreases. So it's kind of like a double whammy here with those hormones being so out of whack. It is literally no surprise that you get hungrier and you don't have that cue to stop eating. And then consequently, you could be gaining weight.
Yep.
Another interesting thing that we found through research is that when you have sleep deprived someone for just one night, the way that their brains react to high calorie foods changes. So people are more stimulated and their brain is more stimulated by foods like potato chips and sweets. And also that part of the brain that controls motivation to eat is affected. So you're a lot more likely to want to like have that, bag of fries than that salad.
Right.
That's just literally what happens when we're sleep deprived. And it's, a lot of times people beat themselves up. Like, I don't have the willpower, but it's literally not your fault.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just your body and your hormones are wired that way to make you make worse choices when you haven't had that sleep.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the chemicals in your body are literally driving you to do that. Well, and I think that's the important piece, because I know with a lot of my clients who, they're dealing with chronic things and autoimmune things and all that. It's you also, I think the other maybe undervalued is the word I'm looking for. Part of sleep is like the repair part, right? Because that's what your body does when you sleep. It repairs and it restores. And that's, which means that if you're not sleeping like quality and quantity wise, that your body's not repairing and restoring as it should, right? So it's like, you're going to get more inflammation. So can you speak to some other, I guess, negative effects of like what happens when you're missing out on that quality?
Yeah. Well, basically what like long-term, what we, you see a lot on the media, there are lots and lots of media reports about what can happen with long-term sleep deprivation. Mm-hmm. And what we're looking at are things like high blood pressure, diabetes, a heart attack, stroke, depression, and obesity. Yep. And there is a caveat that I always like to mention when I talk about this, because these are mentioned quite frequently in the media. It's a little bit fear-mongering, to be honest. They're looking at long-term. They're looking at really long-term sleep deprivation.
Right.
They're looking at years and years and years of looking at somebody with that degree of sleep deprivation.
Right.
Another thing is that some of these studies are not done in the most reliable way. Mm-hmm. Right. And what ends up happening, this is my experience, because I see, quite a few people who have, more of on the insomnia spectrum. They see these reports in the media, and they really, really get very anxious. Mm-hmm. They get very anxious because they're looking at it like, okay, this loss of sleep is going to create this disease state eventually.
Right.
And that's not necessarily true. And it's really actually an unhelpful thing for somebody with insomnia to see, because they are inadvertently taking it out of context.
Totally. Yeah. They're already in that like alerted state to
Yes, mm-hmm. They really are. They really, mm-hmm. It's just, so I always try to make the point that, take what you're saying with these studies with a grain of salt.
Sure.
You really need, because the media will sensationalize the headlines. Mm-hmm. It'll be like, new study says this. And it's like the headline is super scary. But like, then when you actually read the study, you may come to find out that like there's something in the study that is not as alarming.
Yes.
Because most of these studies, they're looking at really correlative studies. They're not like correlation is not causation.
Right.
Right. So mm-hmm. we just really have to be careful of how we interpret these headlines.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a more serious sleep problem.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny you say that, because I saw there was an article, I want to say it was a couple weeks ago, about sleep. But then when you read the article, it was like a study done on shift workers. I'm like, well, of course they're sleep deprived. It was like you were saying, the headline was like talking about effects of whatever, missing sleep and all that. And then you read it and you're like, well, yeah, if you're a shift worker. So you totally have to, first of all, read the article and not just the headline. But then, I think like you're saying, take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
And
Right. And these articles, I mean, I understand the intent of publishing them.
Sure.
Could be to encourage people who are willingly sleep depriving themselves to prioritize sleep. To me, that's the ideal audience.
Yes.
Who will be reading these, mm-hmm. right?
Right.
The person who's like doing the Netflix till 2 a.m. That's the kind of person who might want to be kind of shaken up a little bit by these headlines.
Exactly.
But the chronic insomniac, they are not going to be in a good state when they read these headlines, because they are
causing more panic.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. So shifting gears just a little bit, let's talk a little bit about your story and how you got into this line of work. I know you have some experience yourself with insomnia. So can you tell a little bit about how you got into this line of work?
Yeah. So about 17 years ago, I went through sort of a personal crisis, and that led me to a bout of insomnia. And I really did not know how to deal with it. I'd never had insomnia before. And my doctor gave me sleeping pills, specifically Ambien. And so I took Ambien pretty much every night for 8 years. And it was a really, negative experience.
Yeah.
And so I have to preface all that I say, I'm coming from a personal bias.
Totally.
And I experienced a lot of morning grogginess. When I woke up, I was just like, I felt like I was in a fog, and I really didn't come out of it until, lunchtime. And what I discovered recently, just researching sleeping pills, is that somewhere around 2013, the FDA changed the dosing on Ambien because they were realizing that women were taking too high of a dose. Like the dosing wasn't in keeping with the way women metabolize. And therefore a lot of women were groggy and foggy headed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that would have been really nice.
No kidding.
So it's like, well, I kind of like, that was like probably a year before I stopped taking the pills. So I had like 7 years of taking that under my belt, experiencing that. And I was like, I really wish they had discovered this earlier. And I had also several incidents where I would binge eat at night without really realizing what I'd done the next morning.
I've heard stories about that. I've heard stories. That's crazy.
And I did not ever do anything like get behind the wheel. However, I do feel like in retrospect, there were many times in the morning where my driving was impaired to the point where, it wouldn't have been, I would have looked like I was maybe tipsy.
Right.
It would have been probably in that category of having a couple drinks. So I'm like, that was really just not good. But honestly, I didn't know any other way to handle it. And I ended up eventually titrating myself off the Ambien. But again, I wish I had done it differently. I wish I had had the support of a coach. I mean, that's kind of how I help people with their doctor's guidance. Of course, we need to make sure that, the doctor's in the loop on the titration schedule, all that stuff. But I just kind of did it on my own and kind of white knuckled my way through it and got over that. And then March of 2020 happened and we all know what went on. And I found myself having problems sleeping again. And I became very, very distressed that I was going to slip back into that insomnia spiral. So I started to get online and look at Dr. Google and, just find out like ways to optimize sleep. And I ended up getting an Aura ring, which tracks your sleep. And I've been using that Aura ring, since then. And that ring I'm not affiliated with the company or anything, but that ring did actually give me some really good data points to work on. That's awesome. I was able to kind of get my sleep corrected. And what I did was just organically started sharing on social media some of the things that I've been doing to help my sleep. And I come to find out that several people in my circle were having problems sleeping during the pandemic as well. So all of this information that I researched was helpful to other people, unbeknownst to me, really. I didn't realize the impact that it was having on people. And then I would say at the end of 2020 is when I had a revelation that I wanted to help people with their sleep, specifically women. And I was like, I'm going to be a sleep coach. Like, I was just like, this is what I'm going to do. And so it was just like, bam, bam, bam. Now I had to figure out how to do it. So I had to, research different health coaching programs and sleep science courses. And so I cobbled together, this pretty nice array of courses and certifications and spent a year, getting into that, like heavy duty research and study, and then launched this sleep coaching practice last summer.
That's awesome.
So it all came from a place of, understanding like the struggle, which I think is something that makes me a little bit different than a lot of sleep coaches that are in this space, is that I've really been in the trenches and I got myself through it.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's my story.
I love it. And that's the best way to teach it, teaching from experience. So I think and the fact that you were able to titrate yourself off, the sleeping pills and all that. I mean, that's huge. I think that speaks volumes, and you being able to, lead yourself through that is a huge inspiration and, for people you work with. So yeah, I love that. That's awesome. So I have another question, but before I get to that, I like to leave some tangible things for people with the episode. Not that you haven't already left a huge list of things people can start working on now, but if you were to narrow down like maybe 3 things that people can do right now to improve their sleep, what are the biggest 3 things you would tell them to do like right now?
Okay. Well, we've covered a couple. It's that morning sunlight. And that's been a game changer for so many people that I've coached, including myself. Also, the regularity of wake time and going to bed. The going to bed time doesn't have to be quite as consistent as the morning, as the wake up time, but it should be, pretty consistent. And also I would say getting regular physical activity every day is important, because what happens when you are exerting yourself physically, you are increasing your sleep drive. And so that does actually help your sleep quality and your sleep quantity. And it also helps with, you're in this field, it helps with a lot of other things too. Yeah. So it's just definitely something that I recommend. And you don't have to do HIIT every day, but something to exert yourself every day so that you're building up that sleep drive.
Yep. Yeah. I love it.
I think those would probably be my top tips.
Those are great. Write those down, because those are all good. I love it. So I have one last question to finish with, but before I get to that question, where can people find out more about you? And for those looking for some help, they want a sleep coach, where can they find out?
Yes, you can find me at my website, morganadamswellness.com. I have my sleep coaching package listed there. I also have something called a sleep sanctuary checklist that you can download.
I like that.
Because I am really a big believer in designing your bedroom for optimizing your sleep. I think that's a really great low-hanging fruit kind of activity we can all do. And I'm very active on Instagram. My handle is morganadams.wellness. And I'm also on LinkedIn at Morgan Adams Wellness.
Perfect. All right.
Those are the places. Yeah.
Yes, of course. And I will of course, I have all those links in the show notes, so y'all can check below in the show notes for those. The last question I have for you, one that I like to finish with everyone with, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
Ooh, that's so good. I think to live with purpose, you have to be authentic to who you are and to advocate for your own health. I speak as a 2-time breast cancer survivor who wasn't always in agreement with the health protocols I was given, the treatment choices. And I really feel like when you're in a situation health-wise or in any capacity, that you need to advocate for yourself and come from a place of true introspection and making the best decision for you versus what everyone else tells you to do.
Absolutely.
So
I cannot agree with that more. And I just did a post about that exact topic the other day. So I cannot agree with that more. I love that. Such good, sound advice. Thank you so much for this, Morgan. And thanks for sharing all your insight. I know everybody is going to, really and truly, if you take these tips down, you could sleep better this weekend. So this is going to be awesome and super helpful for everybody. So thank you so much for sharing all of your good insight.
Thank you, Hope. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I know how I can provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics that you want to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's @TheHopePedraza, or visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.